Welcome to my small batch of Big Taste Kitchen and week 2 of bread month. Now, if you joined us last week, we made that delicious, soft rosemary bread. You can find that recipe right up there. Now, if you can believe it, the bread we're gonna make this week is even easier. This week we are making a no-knead artisan crusty bread that only requires 3 ingredients. Well, 4 if you count water. This bread has a beautiful crusty exterior and a soft, chewy inside. Oh, and did I mention there is no kneading required? Now, you do have to do a little planning ahead because the dough has to sit for 12 to 18 hours, but it is a perfect thing. I love to mix it up the night before, let it sit all night, halfway through the day, and then bake it the next day. Now, the only other thing you're gonna need to make this bread is some kind of heavy pan. I'm going to use a cast iron pan here. You can see mine is well loved. You just want a heavy pan that has a lid on it. I have a smaller Dutch oven, cast iron Dutch oven, but you can use a full-size one too. So for this recipe, all we need is 1 cup of all-purpose flour, all right? And then we're going to use half of a teaspoon of salt and yeast. Now, one thing that I'm using for this one that's different than that rosemary bread up there is today we are using rapid rise yeast instead of active dry yeast. Now, you can use either one, you just have to prep it a little different. The difference is with rapid rise yeast, you don't have to proof it in the water. You don't have to put it into the warm water and let it sit for 10 minutes to get nice and foamy and bubbly. With the rapid rise yeast, you can add it right into the bowl with the flour and the other dry ingredients. All right, so I'm gonna just put in 1/2 of a teaspoon. We don't use a lot of yeast in this one because it sits for so long. Now, if all you have is active dry yeast, and that's what you wanna use, no problem. You're gonna take your 1/2 of a cup of water, which we're gonna add in here in a minute, add your yeast in, make sure your water is between 105, 110 degrees, add your yeast into there, let it sit, let it proof. If you have any questions, go ahead and watch that rosemary bread recipe and you can see how I do it there. But for this one, we just add the dry yeast in and then we can just take some room temperature, cool, doesn't need to be warm water, add it in, and then all you have to do is mix it together. Now I'm gonna use my Danish dough hook. You could use a wooden spoon. No mixer required for this one. You just wanna get it mixed up so all that flour is incorporated, and it's gonna be a very shaggy, lumpy dough. And then the only other thing you have to do is grab some saran wrap and cover the top of it. You wanna make sure that's kind of airtight so air's not in there drying out the dough. We're gonna cover it up and then we are just gonna let it sit on our kitchen counter for 12 to 18 hours. And this is what is gonna happen. I made this one yesterday so that I could show you. It is gonna be flatten out, kind of fill the whole bowl and be nice and just bumpy and bubbly on top. Now, about 45 minutes before you're gonna be ready to bake your bread, you wanna preheat your oven to 450 degrees Fahrenheit. And once your oven has come up to temperature, you're gonna go ahead and put your Dutch oven with the lid on it into the oven, and you're gonna let it preheat in there and get nice and hot for about 30 minutes. You need this pan to be really hot when you put the bread in. That's gonna help create that nice crust that we want. Now we are ready to prep our dough to go into the pan. Now this dough is sticky. So you wanna go ahead and just flour our counter and then actually just kind of get some flour on your hands too. And then we're just gonna lift the edges of the dough away from the bowl and plop it onto that floured countertop. All right, like remember I said sticky. And if it starts to stick to your hands, go ahead and put a little bit more flour on. Then we wanna flatten out our dough into a rectangle. And then we're gonna just take that dough from each corner and take that corner and just fold it into the middle. And then lift the other corner until you've kind of almost formed a ball. And we're gonna take it and just flip it over so that that seam side is down. Make sure you have enough flour. And then what we wanna do is just cup our hands around the dough and we're gonna just kind of drag it along the countertop toward us, making sure that all that kind of where we folded it stays underneath. What this does, if you've ever made sourdough, this is similar to what you do when you're making sourdough. It creates some tension on the top of the dough, and you can actually kind of see it tightening. Just a few times. So you get this nice little round in the top. Should be nice. If you have too much flour on there, it won't pull. So you want to create a little tension. There we go. A nice round, soft, smooth, a little ball of dough. Now you may see some little bubbles on there. You want that. And then we're gonna take our piece of parchment paper. If I can reach in here, you got it. And sometimes I just like to squish it up a bit. It makes it easier to fit down into the Dutch oven. And then we're gonna take our bread, just lift it onto our paper, and you can just sprinkle it a little bit with a little bit of flour. And then we want to do something, we want to score it a little bit, cut a slit into it, which is going to help some of the steam escape from the bread. Now, if you make sourdough and you have a lamb, which is like a sharp razor blade, you can use that, or just the tip of a sharp knife. You just want to go about 1/4 inch into the bread. Just create a slit. There we go. Then we're going to cover the bread just for 15 minutes and let it rest before we put it into the hot pan. Just use a cotton kitchen towel. All right, we have our pot preheated. Just be careful, it's very hot. Put this in here. Then we are going to just lift up our parchment paper with our bread on it, pop it right into the pan, kind of pushing the sides of the parchment paper away from the bread. I'm gonna put the lid back on, and then it is gonna go back in the oven at 450 degrees for 20 minutes. Do not peek, do not take the lid off. After 20 minutes, go ahead and take the lid off and leave it in for about another 10 or until it turns nice and golden brown. Crusty artesian bread is done. We're gonna take off the lid. Just go ahead and grab onto that parchment paper, lift it out, slide it on to a cooling rack. I'm gonna get rid of this hot pan. And how cute is this little loaf of bread? The perfect size for 1 to 2 people. You're not tempted to eat an entire loaf of bread. This also would be perfect for like a soup bowl. You could hollow out the middle and serve soup in it, but you just want it nice and golden brown. We're gonna let this cool for a minute and then we'll go ahead and cut into it. So I've let it cool a little bit, but not completely, because like who can wait till bread is completely warm? We're gonna slice into it. Now this bread is so delicious. It would be delicious with anything, but especially would be yummy. Check out my mini meatloaf recipe up there, as well as my chili for 2. It would be especially good with those 2. So let's see if we can hear the crunch. Hear that? Nice crusty outside, but it's nice and soft and tender on the inside. Of course, we need a little butter. Yum. So I hope you are enjoying Bread Month here on YouTube. This is week 2. If you missed our first week, check out that yummy rosemary bread up there. And let's give it a try. So good. I want to share with you one way I particularly like to eat my bread. After I've buttered it, I take just a little bit of flaky sea salt, add that to it, makes it extra delicious. Thanks for joining me for week 2 of Bread Month here on YouTube, and I will see you in the next video.